And the next day he goes up and the secretary shows him in. And the CEO says to him, look, when I developed this company, it didn't have the kind of internal audit that's really required these days to ensure that every day is truly successful. And so we have added a new person to the payroll who will be doing these audits and will be reporting to me. Now, the message here for you is that you need to go back and you need to look at your department. You need to really, really look at it to see that you are viable, to see that you're in the black, to see that things are going well. Because by the end of this audit, I'm going to have a better sense about how productive each department is. And so the man, a little nervous, of course, says, okay, and he goes back down to his office and he starts to look through his books. He takes a bit of work home that night too, and something he doesn't usually have to do. And he continues to look and to read. And over the course of the next week, he realizes to his horror that things are not as great as he thought they were. That in all cases, they are not, in fact, in the black, they're in the red. That there are many things that have slipped through the cracks, mistakes that have been made that were on his watch. And he gets a little bit nervous about it. He gets worried about it. And so he continues through the next month, really trying to create systems that will prevent these errors from ever happening again. He works on them and he works on them. And finally, he gets to a place where he feels pretty confident that he has been able to identify where the holes are, identify where the problems are, and that he will be able to go to the CEO at the end of the month when he goes back for his appointment and tell him, here's where we're holding. So the end of the month comes. It's now the beginning of the 7th month of his tenure there. He's called into the CEO's office. The secretary and the new manager who's doing the auditing is sitting there. And the CEO opens the file in front of him and starts looking at it, starts looking at it, starts looking at it. And he turns to him and he says, your department is not profitable. And the MBA says, well, you know, it's interesting, since you told me about this, I've taken a really good long look, and I've managed to identify where the holes are and where things slipped under the radar for me. And I have a good plan in place so that I'm going to be able to repair them. And the CEO says, well, I'm not sure if that's going to be possible. You see, we have determined that we are going to be operating to a higher level of excellence. In order for you to keep your job, you're going to need to show me once and for all that you are able to be the man for this job. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. And the guy freaks out. He thinks, how could this be happening? So he says to the CEO, listen, I have really worked hard in the last month and I've identified where the problems are. Who better than me to fix these mistakes? You bring somebody else new in, and what's going to happen? They're going to have to go through all the same learning curve as I did. But I'm in a position now that I've identified these things to be able to repair it. And the CEO says to him, you have 10 days, 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, you need to come back to me and argue your case. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. Needless to say, for the next 10 days, that man turns over every stone, every pebble, every rock. He opens the books again. He does a forensic accounting beyond anything he's ever done before. He looks deep into his brain and his soul to figure out how he can keep his job. And he works long hours, barely getting any sleep. And he's stressed and he's upset and he's scared. But by the end of the 10 days, he feels confident. And so when the 10 days are up, he's called back to the CEO's office. And he says to the CEO, listen, I discovered more. I am determined and bound that next year, none of these things will happen, that I'm on top of all of the problems and all of the mistakes that I made. And the CEO looks down at the file and looks up at him and says, I'm really sorry, but it's too late. You see, I saw all of these things months ago. Clearly, you did not do the work necessary. Clearly, you did not use your time in this company in order to give us the excellence we demand. I'm going to have to let you go. I'm really sorry. And the young man looks up and says, Dad, you can't fire me. I'm your child. And in that moment, there's a certain clarity. He says to his father, if you do that, consider the morale of all the people in this company. You know I've done the work I need to do. I need another chance. You're my father. You love me. You cannot do this to me. Please, I beg you, give me another chance. This story is a parable that reflects the period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah, we are all about our aspirations. We are asking to be written for life, to be sealed and written for another year so that we can help the planet, Corporation Earth Inc., in order to do what is necessary and what we need to do to keep our job as living human beings. But when we take a look at some of the things we've done, we recognize maybe we're not so worth keeping after all. Maybe there's something about us that just simply wasn't enough. And after we face the CEO, the first day, which is Rosh Hashanah, we are given 10 days in between that. And that is the period we are in now. These are the 10 days of Teshuvah, the days of repentance, the days of recalculating, the days of getting back on course. Because on Yom Kippur Day, we will stand in front of the CEO and beg for our lives. And you know what? Most of us really don't warrant it. I'm a perfect example. As a person who teaches Judaism, who teaches Torah, I have a higher bar set. And so the things that I have done wrong, and trust me, they are plentiful, where I felt short, where I took a shortcut, where I should have done the real emotional work in validating my right to be here, I got no choice but to beg for my life. And the truth is, just like that young CEO or that young employee, because who gets a job the day they get out of their MBA school with an office and a secretary, unless your father's the boss? Our Father in heaven, God, Hashem, whatever you wish to call it, loves you like a father. And if you struggle with the notion of a father loving you, as some of us might, know that the CEO is your loving parent in heaven. And if you've never had a loving parent, God forbid, then know that the CEO is the ideal loving parent that you wished you could have had, for whom they would turn their lives inside out in order to keep you viable. Yom Kippur is the day you face the CEO of the world. If Rosh Hashanah is about aspiration, it's about not guilt, not shame, not beating your chest like Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is about setting a vision for who you need to be, just like that young man. Yom Kippur is going back and addressing all of the things that stood in the way. However, it cannot be a day of guilt, because guilt is one of the least productive sensations, behaviors, and emotions in the human condition. And we read about it right in our Torah, in the Chumash, at the very beginning. So many of you may know the story of Cain and Abel, the first sons of Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava. And perhaps you know, the story goes as this, that they were meant to bring these sacrifices to God. And Cain, as it were, brings, it's like he regifts the present from last year that he has in his, regifting box. Whereas Abel brings the choicest of everything he has. He goes out of his way and brings the very best of his flock. And the story tells us that God comes down and accepts Abel's sacrifice and rejects Cain's, obviously knowing that he didn't try very hard. Essentially, as if he was saying, you think I want that, candle that you got 2 years ago that you didn't really want and you saved to give to someone you don't care about? I want your heart, and you didn't give me that. And something happens. It says that Cain becomes downtrodden. He feels guilty and horrible. And God says a very famous thing to him, and I'm going to read it to you. It's right here in Genesis. After a period of time, Cain brought an offering to God of the fruit of the ground, and as for Abel, he brought the firstlings of his flock and from their choices. Hashem turned to Abel and to his offering, but to Cain and his offering he did not turn. This annoyed Cain exceedingly, and his countenance fell. Imagine this, right? And God says to Cain, why are you annoyed? Why has your countenance fallen? In other words, why are you behaving like this? Why are you acting like this? Why is guilt taking you over? He says, surely, if you improve yourself, you will be forgiven. But if you don't improve yourself, I'm sorry, something just popped up on my screen. I have to get rid of it. If you don't improve yourself, sin rests at your door. Its desire is towards you, yet you can conquer it. What does this mean? Essentially, what God is telling Cain, and because Bereshit, Genesis, is our family history project and is essentially the behavioral patterns and paradigms of the human condition, God is saying straight out to Cain, if you let yourself get depressed, if you see yourself as less than, and you get bummed out and miserable, you will not be in the position to change your behavior tomorrow. We all know what this feels like, you know? You're on a diet, you eat something you shouldn't, like maybe it's a piece of cake or something, and then you think, I may as well finish the whole cake, I've blown it anyway. There are many, many examples of this, but the best one I learned from my Rabbi Aaron Hoch, who used this metaphor at Rosh Hashanah. He says like this, all of us can be brand new on Yom Kippur, all of us. The best way to describe it, he says, is this. Imagine that you drive a really old, lousy car, which, for example, I did for most of my life. A car that has a dent in the front and a matching dent at the back, some rust on the left side, a little rust on the right side, whatever. If you bump into something, or it gets scratched, or there's another dent, a part of you says, who cares? I'm not going to bother fixing this. It's such a trash heap anyway, this car. I'm not going to keep it clean. I'm not going to take care of it. I'm not going to repair the damage because there's so many other damages. What exactly would the point be? And then he says, when a person buys a new car and they drive it shiny and new off the lot, they're very, very careful with it. They back into spots carefully. They park at the far end of the shopping mall so nobody hits them. They're very invested in keeping it clean and pristine. Now, I never understood this until last year when I got my very first leased new car. Some of you know, all my life I wanted a Mini Cooper. So I waited till all the kids were out of the house and carpool was over, and I leased myself a brand new Mini Cooper. I love it. About a month and a half after I got it, I parked too close to the curb on my street and I scratched a bit of the black rim, and I was bereft. I went in the house. I got a black Sharpie and I kneeled on the curb beside my car on my street. And with the Sharpie, I started filling in that white scratch with the magic marker. Maybe it was this big, but I knew it was there. Okay, I'm telling you that Yom Kippur has the capacity to make you a brand new car rolling off the lot. If you trust that, do the work required to get there. It's not about perfect performance because God expects no perfection. It's about intent and effort. So I saw something on Oprah, which I thought was very useful. I'm going to read it to you because I think it's powerful and also because it is only a reimagination of the actual steps of teshuvah or return. But I'm going to read it in Oprah language first because I think it'll speak to most of us in a less foreign way first. And then I'll explain to you what it means to do the steps of teshuvah so that you can go into Yom Kippur like an angel. Number one, this is Oprah's explanation for the steps of a decent apology. And since this is the time of year that we are waiting for forgiveness from God, it behooves us to ask for forgiveness from those we may have hurt. Because the way that we are judged is the way that we judge others. And the forgiveness we hope to get from our Father in heaven, the CEO, is going to be related to the forgiveness we feel for others. So this is quid pro quo, mida keneged mida, we say in Hebrew, measure for measure. Here's what Oprah says about saying you're sorry. One, you begin with a full acknowledgement of the offense. She says, start by describing exactly what you did wrong without avoiding the worst truths. Once the facts are out, acknowledge that your behavior violated a moral code. Now, this is important. She says, it doesn't matter whether you and the person you've hurt shares the same ethics. It's irrelevant. She says, if you've broken your own rules, you're in the wrong. Accept responsibility. So this is a powerful thing. All of us have received an apology that came with, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's not an apology. I'm sorry I hurt you, but when there's a but in there, an apology is diminished to the point of pointlessness. The first step of a good apology, when you go to that person that you have caused pain to, whether you intended to or not, inadvertently or intentionally, and you ask for forgiveness, there can be no buts, no rationalizations. You accept responsibility. Two, she says, an explanation. A truthful explanation is your best shot at rebuilding a strong and peaceful relationship. The core, deep explanation for your behavior is your key to changing for the better. Explanations help you and your victim understand why you misbehaved and assure both of you that the offense won't reoccur. Excuses merely deflect responsibility. Leave them out of your apology. So there you have it. That's step two. Step three, according to Oprah, and oddly enough, thousands of year old Jewish tradition, genuine expression of remorse. This is key. Anyone really who's been on the receiving end of, I'm sorry you feel that way, knows that it just doesn't count. An apology that comes without remorse, like deep regret and remorse, that a person can feel, a genuine showing of how badly you feel, pointless. And last but not least, our reparation for the damages you did. Here's what Oprah says. An apology requires real repair work, not just saying, I'm sorry, right? Often, there'll be nothing tangible to repair because hearts and relationships are broken more often than physical objects are. In such cases, she says, your efforts should focus on restoring the other person's dignity. Did you hear that? Restoring the other person's dignity. The question, what else do you want me to do? In order for you to see that I'm sincere, starts this process. And if you ask it sincerely and you really listen to the answer and act on that party's suggestion, you'll be honoring their feelings, their experience, and their perspective, which is who you're dealing with. The knowledge that one is heard and valued has incredible healing power. It can mend seemingly unrepairable wounds. And at the very least, even if you are not forgiven, and just remember, because this is the hard, bitter pill to swallow, sometimes when enough damage has been done, your apology may not repair the relationship to the way it was before. It may never be the same. However, you will have elevated yourself to the next level. And that is the work of life. So let's take a look at teshuvah, which means return. Now, here's the fundamental thing about return and teshuvah, which is what we do in these days of teshuvah, that is so powerful. The word teshuvah means to return, which means inherently that you're going back to a place that you were. What does that mean? Well, in Catholicism, for example, they deal with something called original sin, where the perception is that the human being, as a result of the parents' sexual relationship, among other things, is born tainted. But in Judaism, we believe that the soul comes into this world pure and that every morning you have the capacity to begin anew. To return to your goodness, to the pureness of your soul, implies, and listen carefully to this, that you are good. You are good. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter how much you've messed up. You are inherently good, even when you screw up, because you are created in the image of God. Your dignity rests in knowing that you don't have an original sin. You are goodness. So, the first step of teshuvah is regret. Interesting because Oprah called it a genuine expression of remorse. Let's look at the difference between guilt and regret. Guilt is that disgusting feeling in your stomach when you knew you blew it and you did something really terrible and you feel like throwing up and your skin's crawling and you have overwhelming urge to make excuses for it and get out of your head because the feeling is so gross and you don't know what you're going to do and you think you're going to die and it's all about you. What's regret? Well, here's a story I heard once. Imagine you have this elderly relative who's a little bit eccentric and kooky, and this relative asks you to meet them for, a coffee, 2:30 on a particular day. And you say you'll go, but 2:30 to 2:15 rolls around on that day and you're in the middle of a really good movie or a great book or something, and you think, the guy's a little nutty. I'm going to continue with what I'm doing, and I'll call afterwards and say, I'm really sorry I couldn't meet or whatever, but I'm not going to go. And you find out afterwards that this particularly eccentric relative also asked 10 other people or 9 other people to join at that particular same time. And the 5 of them that did show up each received $50,000 cash from this wealthy and eccentric relative. And you feel regret. What are you regretting? That you made a bad choice by not going and you missed a tremendous opportunity. You hear what I'm saying? Regret is recognizing that you missed an opportunity. And when we face the CEO in heaven on Yom Kippur, what you want to feel is regret that the choices that you made and the things that you did brought you further away from the potential of a relationship, not just with God, but with yourself and with the world, based on integrity, goodness, and a higher level of behavior. That is regret. What Cain felt was guilt. What did Cain do? Well, remember, God says to him, if you don't get out of this state of guilt, sin is crouching at your door. And it did. It did. Cain murders his brother because he can't bear to look at the person who showed him up. Can't bear to look at the example of someone seeing the shame of his mistake. Instead of just doing better the next day, he had to kill off the evidence that saw him at his worst. You know, the news is filled with honor killings, God forbid, where somebody murders a child because they've shamed the family, or what they used to call crimes of passion, where somebody kills his wife or her husband so that they never, ever have to deal with them. It's better that they be dead than be a reminder of what you can't have. And that's a normal feeling. And it's not the way to go. And God is telling us from the very start, the way Cain behaved, we'll all behave. Just do better and trust in the process. Because if you don't, if you experience guilt and not turn it into productive regret, where you're going to try and move forward in a new direction, you will end up becoming that battered old car that says to yourself, ugh, who cares? I'm such a mess as it is. Why would I try anymore? The second step of the 4 steps of Teshuvah is leaving the negativity behind. It is not enough to say, I'm so sorry. I feel really regretful for all the things I've done, and continue doing that thing. I feel guilty that I've been talking about someone or lying to someone, and you continue lying. It would be analogous to you taking a child, God forbid, to a rehab facility because the child really wants to kick drugs. But the child has a false bottom suitcase with enough cocaine stuffed into it to like put down a city. It doesn't help to feel regret, to apologize, unless you stop the offensive behavior. And that's leaving the negativity behind. Stop doing the thing that you feel regret about. Now, does that mean you're going to get it perfectly? Does that mean when you say, I'm going to stop doing X, Y, and Z, that you'll never do it again? Of course not. God knows that we are human. But on Yom Kippur, we are also judged based on our intentions, with the full knowledge that we might mess up, but the inside of our heart is red. And what we feel inside of our heart, our desire, our intent, and our refusal to repeat the behavior overrides the fact that we may mess up again. That's an enormous gift, like a huge gift that we're given. It means staying away from all of the paths that lead to this negativity. And there are many, many examples I could do. But for now, let's move on to number 3. Number 3 in the steps of Teshuvah is verbalization. You gotta say it out loud. Why is it important to say it? There is a power in articulating words. In fact, in our Mishnah, in Perkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, and in various other places, we learn about the power of arranging things on our lips. This is one of the things that worries me about our generation, where everybody texts and nobody talks. There is something in acknowledging that what separates man from animal is our ability to speak, to articulate, to take a thought, to transfer it to our mouth, and to go through the gates of our lips, our teeth, and our tongue to ensure that it comes out clearly. And if we blow it, to say that came out wrong, I need to say it again. The act of articulation deepens the neural pathways of the behavior. This is why when we were kids, we learned to repeat the times tables and we said them out loud over and over and over and over, because that which lives in your head and doesn't come out through your lips does not have the power. Your neuroplasticity that you have can be rewired, your brain, by articulating. This is why people have mantras. This is why people need to say things out loud. This verbalization is only done between you and God. You don't have to tell anybody else. But when you stand in shul and you read through that list in the machzor, or if you're going to be at home and you open up your Yom Kippur prayer book and you see that long list of sins that perhaps you didn't do, but we say it collectively because we are a nation that looks after each other. As you say them and you admit to God, and it's interesting, in the 12-step program, one of the steps of becoming healthy is to admit to God, yourself, and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. This is another place where we learn through a system that's been very effective what it means to articulate something. You've got to say it. Now, there are going to be cases where articulating it to the person is impossible. For example, if they've passed away, go to your local rabbi, but there is an example and an idea that you can go to somebody's grave with a group of people and to confess even to the graveside. Some people like to use Facebook or Messenger this time of year to say something like, for anybody I've hurt, whether intentionally or inadvertently, whether through my behavior, my thoughts, or my deeds, whether monetarily, emotionally, psychologically, financially. I ask for your forgiveness. If you're going to do that, and it's a very effective way, make sure that you add a line that says, because I cannot be certain how many people I owe apologies to, because some people don't share, they just hate you inside, please reach out to me through a private message so that I might have the opportunity to speak to you person to person. Articulate it. Articulate it. I had someone phone me a few years ago and said, I'm calling to do teshuvah because I've been gossiping about you all year and saying really bad things about you. I was like, what? And he said to me, yeah, I've been angry at you because X, Y, and Z. So I have done X, Y, and Z. And I realized that was a mistake and I'm sorry. Well, it's incumbent on us to be forgiving. I'll get to that in a minute. Articulate it. One of the wonders, of social media is that aside from the times where it's destroying relationships, it can do a lot of good as well. And number 4, resolution for the future, to not repeat the behavior. So here's a line that I found really interesting. I'm going to read to you. This step can be compared to stepping on the gas. Once you make this resolution, you're really starting to move. Every minute that passes puts miles behind you and the negativity. You're on your way to becoming the new you. Those are the 4 steps of tshuva. If you go through those steps, if you really care, and here's my tiny little piece of advice, and especially in my case, because my heavens, I'm speaking more to myself than I am to you. Pick one thing. Don't take on a ton, because there's no way anybody can repair too many things. Choose one area of your character that needs repairing, just one, and do the work on it, because you will find that as you change small, little things, the capacity becomes greater. There's a beautiful line in the Torah that says, open for me an opening, an aperture, like the eye of a needle. And I, God, will widen it so that horses and carriages can move through it. All we're meant to do is have an opening of teshuvah, a tiny space where we're attempting to repair ourselves. And you will get divine help to ensure that it works. You know, there's no finish line in life or in tshuva. I mean, there's a physical finish line when we die, but there's no finish line in terms of our growth. We are meant to be constantly a work in progress, and we will make mistakes over and over and over. And Yom Kippur was given to us as a gift so that we can take that battered old minivan of a self and roll off the lot on Yom Kippur like a brand new, shiny vehicle. Now, this is a gift. This is a gift to us. And even if you're struggling, I don't know if this is true, I don't know what this means, and so on and so forth, know this. If you do this work during this week of really isolating and identifying a piece of your negative behavior, the smallest piece, and getting yourself to feel regret about it, not guilt, but regret. Regret that you've missed an opportunity because you continue to do X, Y, or Z. And you articulate that, and you put a plan in place, and you stop the behavior. This is an opening, and this changes everything. You want to embrace the process. So I want to read you one more thing. This is beautiful. This is a gorgeous meditation by Rabbi Steve Freeman, based on the letters and the talks of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. The sun is constant. Every day, the same fiery ball rises in the sky. But the moon cycles through constant change. One day it's whole, then it wanes until it's disappeared altogether. Yet, then it is renewed, reborn out of nothingness. See, God is constant and unchangeable, but people are not. Any constancy we may possess for the good comes from God. It's not within us to do it alone. No human being is able to get to the place of re-beginning that we can get to when we ask for divine assistance. And it doesn't matter if you're not even sure how you feel about the principle of divine assistance. Suspend your disbelief and put yourself in a position where on Yom Kippur Day, whether in your home or in the synagogue, that you turn to God, to the CEO, and say, I want another year, but I'm going to use it for the good. I've really examined my mistakes, and I'm going to try really hard to not make them again. In fact, I have a plan in place to ensure that that's the case. I will go into this year repairing all of the tiny little scratches with an emotional Sharpie as they happen. I accept that some of the mistakes that I've made are not repairable insofar as the relationship will never be what it was before. But I can be better. I can be great. These 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur have such power, such power. Begin the work. Sit down quietly with a paper and a pen, or your phone, or your computer, and write down a regret. Pull it out by the roots, just like with dandelions. If you mow the lawn, they're not there, but the roots are still there. You got to pull it out by the root, which means asking yourself, without making excuses, ask yourself, can you find the root of why you behave a certain way? Can you pull out this behavior by the roots? If you find that you're a terrible gossip, you may need to figure out why. Most people don't gossip because they're cruel. Most people gossip because they're desperate for connection. Can you look to the root? I see that Mindy is asking to write down the saying you said, what we should say when we send out a massive Facebook message. You liked it. What I'm going to do is when we hang up from this call, which we have 1 minute left of, unfortunately, wow, that went fast, just paste mine. Use the words that I'm going to use. I mean it. Do it. But this doesn't preclude going directly to someone, because nothing goes further than that. And remember this, it's incumbent on the Jew to forgive. We don't have to get to level 3 of forgiveness, where the relationship is repaired forever and goes back to being as good or better than it ever was. But we need to at least get to a point. And it says that if you go to someone 3 times with witnesses and a plan in place, and they still won't accept your apology, then that transgression transfers to them. My blessing to all of us is, wherever we're holding in terms of what we believe or don't believe, what we think is true or what isn't, that we will use the spiritual energy that's in the air right now to make a change so that we can be the changes we wish to see. I wish you all to be signed and sealed for life. The greatest gift is this global sisterhood. We love each other. I can feel it right through the wires. I give you a blessing that you find the roots of the thing you decide to work on. And as you yank them out, you feel the incredible joy that comes from doing something that only a human being can do. And that's self-reflect, self-regulate, and self-improve. I send you all my love, and I wish you an easy fast I wish you nothing but joy, and that you and everyone you love is signed for life. Bless all of you. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's anything here that we need. Oh, thank you guys. All right, bless you all. Let's go back to our workaday life. But please don't forget to do the work. You've got so much help right now. And I'm going to get onto Facebook and I'm going to write my official message. And you can feel free to take it. You don't have to quote me. Just find the words and do it. But don't do it generically. Make sure that you pick one person, and go and do it in person. It's important. Okay? Bless you all. Goodbye. 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 Shana Tova. An easy fast. Gemar Chasimah Tova. Bless you all. Bye, Nina. Bye.